Marcus Wellington stood in his penthouse office overlooking Manhattan, staring at the engagement ring he'd just thrown in the trash. Another relationship destroyed the moment his girlfriend discovered his true net worth. She hadn't loved Marcus. She'd loved the idea of becoming Mrs. Billion-Dollar Empire. And when he'd caught her selling stories about their private moments to tabloids, something inside him shattered. At 42 years old, with more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, Marcus realized he'd never experienced genuine human connection. Everyone wanted something from him. Everyone performed. Everyone lied. That night, making a decision that would change everything, Marcus created a fake dating profile. No mansion photos, no luxury cars, just him in a simple flannel shirt, listing his occupation as warehouse manager and his interests as hiking and cooking. He wanted to know what it felt like to be seen as just a man, not a walking ATM machine. If you believe that true connection matters more than material wealth, if you believe in the power of authenticity and second chances, please hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything. The first few dates were disasters. When Marcus showed up in worn jeans and drove a 10-year-old Honda he'd borrowed from his assistant, women barely made it through appetizers before feigning emergencies and disappearing. One woman actually laughed in his face when he suggested splitting the check at a modest Italian restaurant. Another spent the entire evening on her phone, not even bothering to hide her disinterest. Marcus felt the sting of rejection in ways his wealth had always protected him from, and while it hurt, it also felt strangely clarifying. This was what ordinary people dealt with constantly. This was real life without the protective bubble of privilege. Then came the evening that changed everything. Marcus arrived at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn for a date with someone named Daniel Foster. The profile picture showed a kind-faced man with warm brown eyes and slight gray at his temples. When Marcus walked in 15 minutes early, he found Daniel already there, nervously straightening napkins at a corner table. Daniel stood up immediately, his smile genuine and slightly anxious, extending his hand for a firm, honest handshake. He wore a neatly pressed button-down shirt that had clearly been ironed with care, and Marcus noticed the watch on his wrist was inexpensive but polished to a shine. This was someone who took pride in his appearance despite limited means. They talked, and Marcus found himself genuinely listening for the first time in years. Daniel was a single father to an 8-year-old daughter named Sophie. His wife had passed away from cancer 3 years earlier, and he'd been rebuilding his life piece by piece, working as an elementary school teacher while raising his daughter alone. Daniel didn't complain about his circumstances. Instead, he spoke with such love about Sophie's recent science fair project, about their weekend ritual of making pancakes together, about the small joys that filled their modest life. When the check came, Daniel insisted on paying despite Marcus's protests, explaining quietly that he'd been saving specifically for this date, and it mattered to him to treat someone with respect. As they walked through Brooklyn streets afterward, Daniel pointed out a small bookstore where he'd bought Sophie her first chapter book, a park where they fed ducks every Sunday. His whole world revolved around his daughter, around creating a life filled with love despite financial struggles. When Marcus mentioned he drove an old car, Daniel simply said, "A car that runs is a blessing. Sophie and I take the bus most places." There was no judgment, no disappointment, just acceptance. They sat on a bench as the sun set, and Daniel asked Marcus about his dreams, his fears, what kept him awake at. No one had asked Marcus these questions in decades. Everyone assumed they knew him based on his bank account. At the end of their third date, Marcus knew he had to tell the truth. His hands shook as he explained everything in Daniel's small but immaculate apartment, while Sophie slept in the next room. He waited for Daniel's demeanor to change, for the same calculating gleam he'd seen in countless eyes before. Instead, Daniel was quiet for a long moment before speaking. He said he was hurt by the deception, disappointed that Marcus hadn't trusted him with the truth. But then Daniel explained something that made Marcus's chest tighten with emotion. He said that he'd fallen for the man who talked about his childhood, who played games with Sophie, who helped wash dishes without being asked. The money didn't matter because those qualities couldn't be faked. Kindness couldn't be purchased. The way Marcus had knelt down to Sophie's eye level when meeting her, really listening to her excited chatter about her pet hamster, that couldn't be manufactured. Daniel stood up and walked to a small bookshelf, pulling down a worn photo album. Inside were pictures of his late wife, of Sophie as a baby, of Christmases celebrated with handmade decorations and love instead of extravagance. He explained that he'd learned through loss what actually mattered in life. It wasn't wealth or status, it was showing up, it was being present. It was choosing someone every single day, not because of what they could provide, but because of who they were at their core. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminds you that authenticity and love matter more than anything money can buy, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face for the first time since childhood. Here was a man who'd lost everything that mattered and rebuilt a life of profound meaning. Here was someone who'd passed a test Marcus hadn't even fully articulated, not by overlooking his supposed poverty, but by seeing him as a complete human being regardless of circumstances. They stood in that small apartment, and Marcus made a choice. He'd spend his resources not to impress Daniel, but to support the causes Daniel cared about, funding scholarships for students who'd lost parents, supporting cancer research, ensuring other single parents had access to childcare and resources. 6 months later, Marcus sat in that same apartment, now their home, watching Daniel help Sophie with homework at the kitchen table. He'd sold the penthouse. The obscene wealth was still there, managed by trusts and investments, but now it served a purpose beyond ego. Daniel had taught him that being seen, truly seen, was the greatest gift one person could give another. And sometimes the richest moments in life were the ones that cost nothing at all. Sophie's laughter, Daniel's hand in his, the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings, the extraordinary privilege of building something real. Please comment real love below if you believe authentic connection is worth more than all the money in the world. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate what truly matters in life.